Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is Matthew. I'll be your moderator for this afternoon session. Thank you, everyone, for attending this virtual CEDAR conference. Our presenter is Melissa Halsey. And Melissa, I think if you're ready to go, we can go ahead and get started.
Great. Thanks, Matthew. So as he said, my name is Melissa Halsey, and I am a special projects technician in Visalia Unified School District, but I'm also a avid, passionate lover of BeyondSST and SACE, which gets me the opportunity to come in and do something like this and use the software all the time. So today we're going to be talking about building an intervention bank, and this is a session that I've done in the past, and it just evolves every time I have the opportunity to do it, because there's so many different ways that you can build an intervention bank for your school. And that's one of the biggest things I have heard from people is, well, I don't know where to get interventions. I don't know how to keep track of interventions. How do we manage our intervention bank? And so the intent in this is to help you figure out the best way for your school or your district to create your intervention bank and then manage it thereafter. So we're going to get started. If you have questions, because we're in this virtual format, feel free to drop those in the QA. Matt's going to be checking that for me. I won't be able to answer live right off the bat, but as we get to the end, we'll have opportunity for questions. And we're going to jump right in. So when we're talking about interventions, we're talking about, all of those different things that we do for our students that are outside of the regular classroom instruction. And so in BeyondSST, one of the things that we have is we have these very specific interventions. And so when you're thinking of those, think of SMART goals. You want a specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timed goal, in this case, an intervention. So you want something that has a start date and an end date. We tend to not let interventions go longer than 8 weeks without checking in and seeing how they're doing. We don't want them to go less than about 6 weeks because we want to give them time to work before we start checking to see how they're doing. But then after that, it's really at your discretion and what the intervention is as far as how often that intervention needs to be provided to the student, how many minutes a day, how many minutes a week, who's providing it, who's monitoring it. And when I look at the interventions in BeyondSST itself, I look at those and I think, wow, those look a lot like a service in special education. It has a start date and an end date and a provider and, the minutes and the sessions and the frequency. And that's great because this is a tier 3 intervention, just like an IEP is a tier 3 intervention. So when we're looking at that, that's the first thing we have to make sure we understand is, our interventions need to be very specific. So question number 1, what are you doing already at your school site or in your district? Do you need to reinvent the whole wheel? And where are you documenting your current interventions? Where are they stored? Does each teacher keep track of their own? Do you have a shared Google Doc that they're on? Is it in a binder somewhere? Do you have a drop-down menu in your school information system that you select from? Do you just use the red book? Where are you guys keeping your interventions? And then if you have interventions, do staff communicate with each other what interventions they have and that they're using? Do sites communicate with each other? Do you have 5 or 6 elementary schools and one school is doing phenomenal and another school is doing terribly poor? And it's because they haven't shared with each other the amazing resources and intervention tools that they have. And do departments communicate with each other? That's another thing that we want to look at. In our district, we're huge. And I know some of the bigger districts are going to laugh at me, but I think we're pretty big. We've got about 30,000 students and I've got 42 schools in my district. And we have a big district office. It takes 2 whole buildings, almost 3. And so when we're looking at our departments, does our curriculum department, do they communicate with our special education department? Do they communicate with our equity and student services department? Do they communicate with each other so that when we talk about interventions, everybody's on the same page? And then what interventions are you guys keeping track of? Are you only doing academic interventions? Are you doing behavioral interventions? How many of you are looking at social emotional interventions? Those ones are crucial right now as we deal with COVID-19 and students being stuck in classrooms from home, Zooming all day. their mental health is really taking a toll. So social emotional interventions are going to come into play even more and more as time goes on. So one of the things that our district did and that we started with was we started by collecting all of the current data that we had at our fingertips. Teachers, psychologists, social workers, our administrators, our BCBAs, our support staff, our paraprofessionals, our special education aides, our behavior technicians, our playground aides. What interventions were they using? And so we sent out a Google survey. You gotta love Google surveys, right? They give you ease of access right off the bat. So I took our district Google survey and I kind of genericed it up a little bit. So if anybody wants a copy of this, at the end of the session, my email address will go up. Let me know. I'll share it with you. You can tweak it and make it specific to your school site if you think that collecting the current interventions would be great. So we asked them to complete the 3 survey items below, following the definitions of intervention as a frame of reference. We wanted instructional interventions, academic, behavioral, social, emotional as a strategy. We wanted them to think of an intervention as a set of actions that when taken have demonstrated ability to change a fixed educational trajectory. And then including the design, implementation, and evaluation of individual or group instruction practices that resulted in lasting positive change. And so we wanted to look at that. So we asked for their email address. We asked what school site they're at. And then we asked them to list the academic interventions that they provided at their school, the behavioral interventions that were provided at their school, and the social emotional interventions that were provided at their school. This is how we started collecting our bank. We have 42 schools. That means 42 different principals, multiple psychologists, multiple teachers, social workers, behavior supervisors, assistant principals, learning directors, counselors, all providing and creating interventions. But they weren't stored in one location. So the first thing we did was we got everybody's intervention data and we brought it into one location. Matt, are you guys able to see my intervention Google form? I know it didn't pop up last time.
No, actually, we are still seeing the, yep, there we go.
Let me go back and show you my amazing form. Is that better?
Let's see, there we go. That's
all right. So, it's a Google form, but it's a pretty easy, simple Google form. And your sites can provide all of that information to you. And we sent it to everybody. You can send it to everybody on your campus. Anybody who's providing interventions, anybody you think is providing interventions, we want their information. We want their feedback. You can take this even further if you want. I've got another example of a Google form that we use that you may want to use instead of this one. So let me go back into this and we'll see. Am I back on the PowerPoint?
No, you're actually still on the survey.
This is why I'm not a teacher. This is why I'm okay, I can do this. Now we're back, right?
All right, yes.
Awesome. Okay, so we are collecting our current data with that survey. So, and we surveyed everybody. Like I said, we surveyed our teachers, our psychologists, our social workers, our administrators, our BCBAs. And this is kind of an example of what we got back. If you've used a Google form, it just comes back in a nice little spreadsheet. And we got all of these great interventions that our school sites were using. And they came to me, or they came to us as academic. They came to us as behavioral. They came to us as social emotional. And this was the beginning. This is where we were able to start and look and see, here's what we've got. This is what's in place. And then I said earlier, do your departments work together? Are they communicating? We took this data and we sat down with our directors of special education, our directors of curriculum, our directors of student services, social emotional wellness, after school. We took all those key players and we sat down and we look at these and say, well, are any of these things that we should be supporting at a district level? Are any of these things that we could buy curriculum, not just for one school site, but for all of our school sites to use? Are there any curriculum here that we want to pilot and see how it works and then roll it out to all of our other school sites? So things that we're piloting still at certain school sites is the second step program for social emotional learning. We have a couple of school sites that are piloting that and still utilizing that for us to see how those interventions are going to be working. All of our school sites now use Boys Town. We use Boys Town as part of our behavioral intervention supports. And we took that from all of the information that we received from our schools, from all of our people who are providing the interventions. We needed their feedback. They were our stakeholders. So the next thing we have to figure out is how are you going to organize your interventions? Are you going to have all of your interventions in a bank that are organized by subject? English language arts, math, speech, ESL, science, whatever your interventions are going to be. Or are you going to organize your interventions by grade? Primary school, secondary school, or you're going to go even further and organize them by kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, and so forth. How do you want to organize your bank? This is your bank. You pick what's going to be best for your district, for your school site. I acknowledge that I have 42 schools and we run the gambit of pre-K through adult ed. So for us, our organizational structure is going to be much better the way that we have it, but it won't be beneficial for a elementary school district. It won't be efficient for a high school unified school district. So you guys have to figure out what's going to be best for you. Now let's go into my bank. That is not what I want. Where is my bank? Let me pull up my intervention bank for you guys real quick. So, and then the other thing that I like to do is I like to put my intervention bank actually in the document library of BeyondSST, because I think once it's in that document library, it's much easier for you to find. You don't have to scramble trying to find it someplace else. Let's see here. Where did it go? I apologize, guys. I had it and then it disappeared. In the meantime, Matt, while I try and pull up my bank, are there some questions or anything that I can provide assistance with while I'm scrambling here?
Well, one user asked about sharing those Google Forms with the group. Are you able to share those forms with everyone?
I will absolutely share those with everybody. I think those are, they kind of help not having to start from scratch. And then Matt, if you can do me a favor while I'm trying to get this open, if you could share my email address, mholsey23, melissaholsey23 @yahoo in the chat.
There you go.
That way they can reach me for those. Why is this doing this? Oh, heck. Best laid plans, right? This is what happens when you try to get fancy with hyperlinks. So I had a beautiful Google website that had classrooms, and now everything has disappeared on me. So if you guys give me 1 second, and I really do apologize, this is not how I wanted to do this. I wanted it to be beautiful and perfect, and best laid plans always go awry. Are there any questions other than that one, Matt, that I can kind of, as I stumble through this, trying to pull up my site?
Right now, no, haven't been a lot of questions come through yet.
All right, well, the good news is I finally got my site to open up. Now I just have to remember how to go back in and share. This was supposed to be the best easy session today. Apparently that is going to backfire on me.
But if anyone does have any questions, now would be a good time to type them into the Q&A.
All right, I got it. Boy, how embarrassing. All right, so this is our intervention bank. And when you're in BeyondSST in the document library, you can click it and open it. And for some reason, I did not link things correctly. I blame it on not having the same computer. But for us, there's a couple different things that you can do. I talked about the survey that we used for our teachers and for our staff. If you don't want to use a survey like that, you can use something similar to this is what we use to continue to update the bank. They select what grades the intervention is applicable to, what kind of intervention it's going to be, if it's academic, if it's behavioral, or if it's SEL. And then if there's a subject that it would apply to, and they can always put, something else. And then we have them put the description in detail. And then if there are supporting documents, we want those attached. And then I added to ours recently the frequency, the duration, and then who the intervention is provided by, because I wanted it to be similar to the way the intervention is written in BeyondSST, so that it wasn't something that we had to really try and figure out. We can always adjust it to more time or less time, but I thought if you're giving me an intervention, maybe it would be helpful to know how often you're implementing that intervention. And so when they submit it, it goes to our document, and then we have meetings where we can update it, review it, and add it to our actual intervention library if it's an intervention that we think would be beneficial to have. So if I go back, and I have a blank template of this bank if you guys want to copy it. It doesn't have any of the links. It's just this. And then when you open up academic, ours are all sorted by grade level. And so what I can do is, as a teacher, I'm a first grade teacher, I need some support. I go in and I look and I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm looking at the ELA interventions. I want to do the click or clunk. So here's the intervention guidelines. And this is the supplemental material that I need to provide to my student for this intervention. It's all in one place. Perfect. Oh, I need some math interventions. Here's my math intervention. Here's the resources that I may need to utilize. And it's all located in one place. And this is all just done through lots of Google Docs and linking. And if you need help with that, YouTube is like the best resource on how to use Google Docs and clink and chunk and mix things together. So there's my academic, or, I have social emotional, or I have behavioral. So behavioral, I'll go to, say I'm going to go to 4th grade, and I want to use the check-in, check-out. And here you can see this is where I did a little more of we added the frequency, we added the duration, we added who's providing the intervention, and we added the monitoring tools. So now my teachers can go in and they can say, okay, I'm going to use check-in, check-out, or I'm going to use this is the using effective commands, and it's the teacher self-monitoring sheet. So you have all of this here at your fingertips. The biggest obstacle, the hardest part, is getting all of the information from a single source or from all of your multiple sources and putting it into a single source. And then you kind of have to look at the interventions and check and see, is this an intervention that's applicable across the board to all of our schools, to all of our students, or is this something that's specialized that we really don't want to put on our intervention bank? Or if I'm in my intervention bank, do I want something that says, not just academic, not just behavioral or social emotional. Maybe I want other interventions in there. Maybe instead of academic, behavioral, social emotional, I have math, I have ELA, I have all of the subjects instead of opening it up into grade levels. It really opens up that opportunity, but it's in a nice, organized, safe space. Teachers are at home and working, they can access the intervention bank. Teachers are in a classroom, they can access the intervention bank. You're in a meeting with parents, and parents are telling you, well, I know that Tommy needs services or interventions. I know he's struggling with math. What do you guys think? What would be some options? And you can open it up and be like, oh, academic interventions. He's in 1st grade. He needs some math assistance. These are the interventions that we have, Mom and Dad. What menu item would you like to select from? And Mom and Dad are looking at the menu, and they'll help. They can kind of pick out what the math interventions are going to be, and the teacher sees what's going to be there. And it really helps you kind of identify and provide those resources to the parents as well. You can put this on your district website and make it available to parents, so parents know, hey, these are the different types of interventions that I could be talking to my kids' teachers about and getting support with so that my child is successful. In this online world, maybe we need to have a section of just online interventions, things that we can be utilizing for students during an online platform. There are so many different ways to utilize intervention banks. Other things that I've seen done that I think are super awesome and effective is just a Google Classroom and then creating stuff within the Google Classroom to house your interventions. I'm a big fan of Google. I think Google does great things for educators, and I think it helps us keep everything relevant. And as you update it, it updates for everybody. No more sending out printed copies of an intervention book that outdates after 6 months. Okay, I have been rambling, but I get really excited and I talk way too fast. So, any questions, anything you guys want? So April, I don't have my middle school intervention bank on here. This is still kind of in development process. We are in the process of building it. So I don't have all of my interventions built. In fact, I just have a handful here because this was like our, oh, school's closed for the month of March and we're month of April, the month of May, and the month of June. We should probably do something with all this time. So we've been collecting. We've just now started compiling all of the data into our actual bank. So I apologize, I don't have my interventions right here and ready for you guys. But I can share with you guys, like I said, Matt put my email address in there. I can give you this, this website template is completely blanked out. It just has the buttons on it so that you can, you know, add your own links if you want. I can share both the survey that we used and the survey that we've created on the web page that allows you to have teachers submit their interventions. It really is kind of one of those, what are you guys already doing on your campus? What are you already doing that, you know, everybody should have access to?
And for the Google documents, will they need a password or anything to access those?
Once I send these out to you guys, no, you shouldn't need a password. I'll make it so that they're viewable, but to anybody. And then you can just copy it and make your own copy, your own version of it. In fact, I think I might be able to, do I have a copy of my intervention bank? I do. Let me see here. So I will share this with everybody. All right, let's see here. Let me get this link. That way I can just put it in the box for everybody. So this one is that should let you open up the site and create your own site. And then the other one is this is so much more fun when we're not having to do this stuff all through online. It's just not my favorite. It's just not my favorite. How do I add collaborators to this? There we go. Change to anybody. Okay, this next link that I'll send you is this next one in the Dropbox. That is the form that they can fill out where they're creating the intervention as part of the intervention bank. And then I will try and find the survey and get the survey for you guys. Matt, am I putting these only to you and not to everybody else?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out. I'm actually
Oh, man.
I'm reposting the links to all attendees, so I think everyone has them now.
Okay, I am so sorry, guys. It's been quite a morning. Awesome. So you guys you've got them. So you have all of my links. You can start creating your own intervention banks. The survey link is the last one that I need to get to you guys. Where did that one go? That one is. There's my survey. I think Matthew's reposting the links for me because I just keep posting them to him. And apparently he's the only one who gets to have copies of my links today. Oh.
We'll make sure that everybody gets access to everything.
Yes.
And, yeah, and having said that, yeah, we'll try to send an email out to all the attendees with all of the materials, all of the recordings from today's session. So you all should have access to all these materials and links.
Yeah, and if it doesn't work, you guys have my email address. You can absolutely email me at any time. I'll get back to you. I love sharing this information with you guys. And I think if you can have a sufficient intervention bank that has tried and true interventions with all of the resources at your fingertips, parents and teachers are more inclined to get on board with the SST process, and it stops the unnecessary excessive assessment of students for special education. You know, our goal should be the least restrictive environment for every student. And in many cases, students will qualify for an IEP, but the least restrictive environment is an SST intervention. They don't have to have an IEP. They can get the services adequately through an intervention. And so that's where I get really passionate. And if we have everything at everybody's disposal and they can start using this stuff the way it's intended to be used, we're serving students in such a better capacity. They're not being pulled from the classroom to be tested. They're not missing instructional time. They're not dealing with that stigma of being labeled as special education and having to go to that certain teacher's classroom instead of getting to do stuff with everybody else. And so it really makes it one of those opportunities for every student to have what everybody should have. It creates such an equitable environment for everybody, and every student can achieve their maximum potential. And teachers are on board with it, and parents aren't complaining that their child is failing and that their teachers aren't supportive, because parents have a role and they have a process and they get to be part of the solution. And I know as a parent who has, I have a son who we've gone through the SST process with him, and I had him tested for special education and he didn't qualify, and I should have never wasted the teacher's time having him tested, but I didn't know what else to do. If they had presented me with a menu of interventions and said, Mrs. Holsey, these are the interventions that we think might work for your child and his reading issues, do any of these look sufficient to you? I would have absolutely told the teacher, yes, please try any one of those, before I pulled him out of class to be tested repeatedly. And he missed even more instruction time and fell further and further behind. And that's where, you know, some of this passion comes from, is all of our kids, every single student in every single district across the state of California, United States, deserves equal access and opportunity to a quality education. And our mindset has to shift from, I have 32 kids in my classroom and I'm going to teach to 32 kids this way, to I have 32 kids in my classroom and 30 of my kids need to be taught this way, but 2 kids are going to need a little extra help, and here's how I'm going to help them, and I'm going to do it with grace, and I'm going to do it with a good attitude, because I have the tools provided to me. I have the support of my administration. I have the support of my co-teachers. I have the support of the parents. And these 2 students who would normally continue to slip between the cracks and become a behavioral problem are going to be successful contributing members of society, because I had the resources I needed to get that far. Okay, and now I'm off my soapbox.
A couple of other questions. How many interventions do you recommend to try at one time?
So depending on what the interventions are. So if you've got a kiddo who's dealing with all kinds of academic issues, let's try maybe 1 for each subject. but let's not go overboard. And if you have academic and behavioral issues, let's try and focus on some of the academic issues first, because the academic issues could be what's facilitating and pushing the behavioral issues. Those behavioral problems could be coming from, I have to sit down and read, and I have to read in front of the class, and I don't know how to read. And rather than embarrass myself, I'm just going to be a jerk, and I'm going to do stupid stuff and blurt and make noise, because it takes off the attention off the fact that I can't read, and nobody's going to make fun of me. So instead, if we put emphasis on the reading, maybe the behaviors stop. Maybe the bad behaviors stop and the reading score improves, or the math score improves. So, start with 1 or 2. If it's different subjects, you might be able to get 1 for each subject. But if there's a lot of behavioral stuff too, and you see there's academic and behavioral issues, start with those academic and see if that leads to helping with the behavioral. As far as data collection forms, I see that's a question too. In BeyondSST, we have data collection forms. They're part of the software. And Matt, I know it's not software because it's not downloaded on a disk. What is this technically?
It's a web-based application.
Okay, so they're part of this web-based application. I have to quit calling it software because I know it's not software. Okay, so let me go back into BeyondSST so you can kind of see what that looks like. So in BeyondSST, you have your tier 2 and tier 2 interventions, and then you actually have your SST intervention plan. And once the interventions have been documented or listed in here, like here's that math journal, and here's all of our duration, all of that stuff is in here, then we ask the teacher or whoever's providing the intervention to go in once a week and just hit this monitor progress. And they can go in and they just add a record. And every week they just put in, the date. And if they collected data sheets or if they didn't collect data sheets, if the intervention had a positive, negative, or no change, and then what the scores were, who it was that collected the intervention data or provided the intervention, the type, and then any notations here. And you can see in my examples what I collected as far as my pretend student. But after 6 weeks of intervention or 8 weeks of intervention, when we come together as a team and mom and dad or whoever has ed rights is sitting there, and you've got your school psychologist if they need to be part of the meeting, and the administrator and the teacher, we can look at it and say, wow, you did this intervention with fidelity for 6 weeks and the student is doing amazing. We're going to keep him on it, or we're going to fade him off of it and he's just going to go back to the way it was, or holy moly, this thing is not helping. We need to change it, or we need to refer this kid for something else. We need to look at special education. We need to look at a 504. But we tried, we did the interventions, we did them with fidelity. If the student doesn't qualify for special education in the state of California, it asks us questions on that. We have the data to support and justify our referral for special education. It all goes together, but that all comes from having a robust intervention bank in an accessible area for your staff. I hope that answered that question. Any others, Matt? I see, will the intervention banks ever be added into BeyondSST so sites, districts don't have to create the intervention banks from scratch? Matthew, what are you guys thinking on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And like you said, Melissa, there are so many different kinds of interventions and intervention banks. We are definitely thinking about it and thinking about different ways and different sources, as well as having user entered intervention banks. So schools can come up with their own intervention ideas and put them in a bank. Again,
SACE has something similar for goals, but you guys really had to vet and find something that met requirements. And that's where it becomes complicated and tricky, right? It's not as easy as just dropping an intervention bank into the web-based system.
Right, and again, not everyone calls the interventions the same thing. So, we're kind of leaning towards a district customized intervention list. But again, we're still thinking about it. We're still talking about a lot of different options. But it is definitely on our big list of requests from the district. So yes, that is something we're looking at very seriously.
So if you guys want that, you probably need to help Matt and these guys get that by creating small banks within your own districts. That way, we can all have the state of California on the same page for what interventions are called, how they should be documented, to make the creation of an intervention bank someday possible. But I'm not making any promises because I don't work for these guys like that. I work for these guys like, I just want you to make your own intervention banks and use this stuff because it's so amazing. Erica, all of our spreadsheets are not linked yet. I'm working on that. It's just not quite there yet. Like I said, we just started working on this. And when CodeStack said, hey, Melissa, can you do a session on intervention banks? I was like, oh my gosh, we've been working on this. And then I didn't realize how fast November would come and how much of it I wouldn't have done yet. How are interventions tracked from year to year? Dana, we track all of our interventions in BeyondSST. We don't put anything in CUMES at our district. The SSTs don't go in a CUME, they just stay in BeyondSST. So if you guys ever get a student from Visalia Unified, the CUME will have a face sheet in it that says all of our students on SSTs or 504s are in BeyondSST. Please contact us for records if you don't have this web-based platform. And we do the same thing for special education records. We don't put those in our CUMES. You get a note in the CUME that says, student has special education. If you need access to their records, you need to contact us. What this does do is in the student history, every time you have, and I probably don't have the right kid picked, but every time you have a student that has any kind of, uh-oh, why isn't this, it's not clicking. I'm pushing buttons, but it's not working. Over here on the left side of the screen, hopefully you can see in the green box, it says forms, general info, parents, teachers, student history. In that student history, when the button lets me work and I'm not in Zoom, it'll open it up and every historical SST meeting that's been held is saved and archived in there as a PDF. So you can go back and view it.
Try to just refresh the page, Melissa. You should be able to access it now.
Now watch this be a kid that doesn't have a history. Oh, he has one. He has one history. Some of my training kids have a ton of these little blue books. And when you open it up, all of the forms that have been affirmed, like we do in SACE, are in here where you could open it up and look at their intervention plan, and you could look at their progress monitoring, and you can look at their previous plans. And that's really nice. Some kids we see, they need to be on interventions the same time of the year every year. Maybe they're dealing with some trauma. And so you can just go back and see what's already been done and not have to reinvent the wheel. But like I said, in the library, I always like to put in our document library, the intervention bank. And again, it's not working. But I like to put it in here. This is what happens when you work at midnight the night before, where you can open this up and the intervention bank is there. I think this is last year's intervention bank. So this was a different intervention bank that I tried last year. I just did it with the Google form. And then it was just a Google sheet, and this is what they were provided. So if you want to go low key, not high tech, you can just use a Google form and then provide access to the form response. And then the teachers can see the interventions this way. So that's another way to do it if you don't want to go fancy website version. But it's quickly accessible in the BeyondSST library. And I'm going to pause and resume, and hopefully you guys are seeing my old last year's version of a intervention bank. And this was before our district even realized what we needed. Any other questions? I'm sorry that I ramble. It's so much better when we're in person because then we can all dialogue about the different interventions and what's working and what's not working and how we want to track it. But I would honestly consider, if you guys have a lot of interventions and you're a small district or a big district, look at creating a district intervention menu bank, either in Google website, in a Google Sheet, or a Google Classroom, or if you have something on Schoology, or if you have something that you can use some other platform, or you have someone who's really good at creating websites that aren't in Google. I think those are amazing ways to be able to track and create your own banks. So any other questions, guys? Like I said, I'm really excited. I would love to see what you guys create for intervention banks. I'd love to see what other districts come up with and how you guys have a menu for interventions, and how you plan to present interventions to your parents and to your teachers. Because I think, you know, as a state, the more we collaborate, the better we're going to be. And if you're not already using BeyondSST, consider having your district adopt it, because it does allow you the opportunity to track all of these interventions that we are creating. Matt, I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, if you'd like, I'm going to put the support email address here in the chat. So if you'd like a demo, or if you would like more information about the program, send us an email and we will be happy to set up a demo for you. Usually we do demos, well, we usually do them in person, but now we're doing them online. You can invite a small group. You'll have plenty of time to ask questions. So yeah, let me put that email address here in the chat.
Melanie, if you guys aren't ready to go with a district intervention bank, there is a red book. It's called I think it's the PRIM is what we use to notify it as. It's the Resource Intervention Manual, Public School Resource Intervention. Oh gosh, I can't remember. It's a big red book, and it's, yes, the PRIMs. It is the PRIM. You can get it on Amazon for like 120 bucks. And it breaks things down pretty good. I mean, you can go down by subject, you can go down, it really does break it down. And that's a great one to get started with. And maybe just you guys sit down as a school site and the teachers and you guys can look through it, and everybody picks 2 or 3 that they think are going to be standardized interventions for your school site. And that's the other side of it too, is you want a menu, but you don't want a menu that's so big that you can't make sure that that's an effective intervention that works consistently. So limiting it quite a bit to, you know, we only have these 6 or 7 tested and approved and good interventions that we're going to put into our bank, as opposed to we have 50 interventions and we don't know if all of them work, but we have 50 for you to choose from. And I think the PRIM addresses behavior and academic. Let's see here. It's the pre-referral intervention manual. And I think if my screen is sharing, it is currently on sale on Amazon for $75.59. But this is another one of those where you could kind of, as a school site, if you're a small enough school site or a small enough district, use this to get started. And then you guys can build off of this. You can kind of look and see what are some other intervention resources or other tools that you want. So Sandra, if you guys want to shoot an email to me, and I'll put my email address in here again. Once I get this finalized a little more, I can share it with you guys. We are still very in the infant stages of building out that thing. And I think that previous intervention bank that I shared with you guys was one that I made up last year for a conference. We didn't have, our district had not gone down any kind of route to get interventions. And so I think I borrowed, acquired a lot of the interventions that were on that original document here. I think I stole a lot of these out of the PRIM. So in case you're wondering what kind of interventions are in there, this would be an example of some of the interventions that I borrowed out of the PRIM for training last year. All right, well, I think we got like 5 minutes. So if you guys have other questions, I am happy to assist. If you have questions on BeyondSST itself, absolutely love the software. Use it for everything that I possibly can. because I think it's super effective in making sure that interventions are documented and that teachers are held accountable to performing interventions with fidelity, so that we can make rational decisions based off of data for student referrals for the next steps. Danielle, I'm going to need a little more clarification. Are digital program or intervention programs included in the bank? If you're asking like if we use digital programs included in the bank, we would put links to those in the bank that I showed you earlier, or we would put notations in the little cell that said resources. We might not document that you should utilize this intervention program or you should utilize this digital program. But that's about it. All right, guys, if you have not decided to use BeyondSST, please, please, please think about it. Not just because I think it's amazing, but because if we can get more of the state school districts using this as students move between schools, everything moves smoothly. And when you get kids from my school, you've already got their interventions listed out. And when I get kids from your school, I know what interventions you were already doing. And absolutely, Dana, you foresee an increased need because of distance learning. Everything can be done online through BeyondSST to document your interventions. You guys will be able to create interventions online and provide those supports. As far as distance learning interventions, I don't have any off the top of my head that I can think of, but if I find any, I will share them with you guys, those that emailed me.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Melissa. That was a great session, and thank you to all of the attendees for attending the conference. We've got one more session coming up. Otherwise, thank you. And again, send us any questions. We'll be happy to give you a demo of the program or answer any questions you might have. So again, thank you all for attending.